We're continuing with our series, being inspired by Braiding Sweetgrass with Robin Wall Kimmerer. Some of the writings around love and reciprocity as a theme. She offers a braid of stories meant to heal our relationship with the world. So the indigenous ways of knowing, scientific knowledge, and then the story of her personally as a scientist and as an indigenous person bringing together in service to what matters the most. And what good is knowledge unless it is coupled with caring? And I've really been thinking about that the last little while of just the amount of distress and despair around the environment and how disconnected we can be and how we can come back into connection. I love the connection she's making around this cold, analytical view of facts that science often has and how it can disrupt any kind of ecological compassion and connection that we have. And wanting both the revelations of science and the indigenous worldview, where matter and spirit are both given voice. And this next is that this is pretty radical in terms of our cultures that we live in, that anything that's fundamental to our well-being, like water, land, and forests, are commonly held, and that it's a common resource to be tended with respect and reciprocity. That's something that we can continue to open in our own hearts, at least, and in the way that we're approaching this. This morning in the daily practice, we were doing kind of a meditation on the breath of plants, giving life to animals and to ourselves, of course, and our breath giving life to plants, and what a reciprocal relationship that is. And how can we use some of those really basic experiences of connection and reciprocity to then open up to a wider consciousness that we live in a world. The world is a living world. It's not just here for us to use. It's not just here for what we can take, that there's a reciprocity and a caring that helps us to deepen into that relationship. Our gifts, the fierce defense of all that has been given. There's so many people who are really putting their hearts into making the world better. The picture on the left, most people would recognize Jane Goodall, and the woman standing beside her is Autumn Peltier, who's a Canadian Indigenous water activist and has been working with this since she was a teenager. Part of her culture of respect for the earth, respect for water, and that we're called to give our gifts and to dance for the renewal of the world. One of the ways that we can come out of a survival response, I think, is to dance and to sing and to bring our human hearts to this work. So on my social media feed, I have a lot of things around good news, environmental news in particular. There's so many things that people are doing that I think is so encouraging to know, because in the mainstream media and on our social media feeds too, a lot of times what we're seeing is all of the bad news. And there's a lot of really serious effort underway to change global warming. And when we listen to the conferences that happen at the UN level and the governments that aren't taking action, it's pretty easy to get discouraged. And there's a lot of urgency to this. However, there's a lot of things that have happened that we might not be hearing about. All the people that are cleaning up rivers. And I saw something recently about a big barrier that's collecting the spring runoff of all of the plastics that come into the ocean through this river. That's happening all over the place. So people are cleaning up the environment and awakening to some of the ways that we have inadvertently, and maybe through greed as well, but also through this disconnection, that we've created these problems in the world and created these catastrophes that we don't have to be frozen around. We can take action around. And this earthactivisttraining.org is one of the organizations. It's really working with educating people. The middle picture there at the bottom is an office in Japan where they have gardens throughout the workplace where people can grow food at work. There's all kinds of illustrations of that. R.J. Clifton, I wasn't familiar with him. This is a quote from Braiding Sweetgrass as well. We're going to go into some inquiry now in a moment. Suppression of our natural responses to disaster. So this is something that I think we can all feel is part of the disease of our time, the refusal to acknowledge these responses, that we are weary, that we've had enough, we can't take anymore. If we can't acknowledge that we're feeling that way, it causes a dangerous splitting. It divorces our mental calculations from our intuitive, emotional, and biological embeddedness in the matrix of life. So we work all the time with connection. A lot of our work is connecting with our own self. The effect of trauma is that we disconnect and we're finding our way back home. And a lot of the trouble or the difficulty that we have connecting with what's actually going on in the world is because we're feeling shame, we're feeling overwhelmed, we feel powerless. And if we can come in and feel that, allow ourselves to feel that, we don't have to split off. We don't have to go into a fight response or a flight response or get numb, that we could actually engage and be present. So the first part of the inquiry is this: my disconnection from myself, other people, and from a reciprocal relationship with the living earth. What does that feel like? You can have your eyes open or closed. Locate yourself in your body. You'll probably have some thoughts about it. And then really coming into the feeling of that in your body. What does that feel like? What are the sensations? Disconnection, we have to kind of move in and move forward. Notice your experience with that. And if the disconnection is working really well, we're not aware that we're disconnected until we approach that a little bit. Notice your breath. Notice if there's something in your mind that's taking you away. If you're going into a fight, flight, freeze response. If you were to touch into connection, I feel connected with myself, other people, and I feel that reciprocal relationship with the living earth. Does that feel true? Could it feel more true? Stating the opposite of what's true can often help us find our way into more connection. Let yourself realize, what do I feel right now when I look at this? Keep your breath moving. Let your breath happen in your body. Let yourself feel that. Another quote from her in the book is, each of us comes from a people who were once indigenous. We can reclaim our membership in the cultures of gratitude that formed our old relationships with the living earth. So many of us who are from some kind of European descent, we might have to go back several hundred years before the spread of Christianity kind of forced out a lot of the earth-based spiritual practices. And there's all kinds of nuance here as well. But if you were to think back through your own life, or maybe you've had parents, grandparents, other people, and you might have other blends in your heritage as well: Indigenous, Black, people of color. One of the things that's interesting to work with is to know that at any time we can come back into relationship with the earth. Let's try some of those. I am connected with the living earth. See what comes forward for you. It might be something you feel in your heart. It might be memories of when you were a child and you used to make mud pies. It might be that you get your solace and healing by going into nature. Maybe you don't do it as often, but you have memories of doing that. I am connected with the living earth. I belong on the earth. And we could look at being grounded on the earth, feeling our roots go into the earth and the connection that we have with the sky, the earth. Do we feel at home here? Is another way to look at that. Of course, our nervous systems get in there too. Well, I feel at home if it's sunny and calm, but not if there's a hurricane, because we know that there can be danger. If there's anything like that going on in your nervous system, that's okay. It's just what's there. And then coming back into your breath, into your body, maybe there are some tendrils of connection. And I belong with the people of the earth. We could also explore I belong with the animals, with the birds of the sky. We could explore many components of this. One of the things that happens through trauma is that we feel disconnected from other people and disconnected from ourselves. We could try that on. I belong with the people of the earth. And notice if you're in your body, notice your breath. We have this heartfelt openness, this a desire to come into alignment. We know how awful it feels to be disconnected, and we want to nurture that connection. Reciprocity, gratitude, open heartedness, compassion, connection, alignment. So, one of the things that we're always working with is how we could take away some of the obstacles. If we're looking at, I want to be more regulated in my nervous system, we might start having more continuous breath instead of holding our breath. We might relax our body instead of having that contraction. So, in terms of this, of the environment, of our relationship with the living earth, with reciprocity, if you were to think about how you could reduce some of the obstacles to that, and specifically around the environment if you want, but you could also broaden this out. What is it that you're willing and able to do right now? One of the things that I've started to do several years ago is drive the speed limit or not too much over. And just not as just for safety, but also because it uses less fuel, produces less pollution. Healing our own trauma is a way that we can contribute to the blessing of connection in the world. So let's sit with that for a moment. What comes to mind that's relatively easy? Some of these things are bigger and they're broader, like going off grid or reducing the amount of water we use, something like that. And a lot of us are already doing those things. But is there anything else that kind of pops up as relatively low hanging fruit? What could I do that would be less harmful? Might be eating with mindfulness and letting that go into the good. I am willing and able to. What comes to mind about how you could nurture a closer connection? So, that one slide we had about people sharing their gifts. What is a gift that you could share, either in this arena around the environment or something else? Maybe it's you're really good at cards and you like to, maybe you could go to a neighbor's and play cards with them or something just to make a connection, or donate money, get involved with a volunteer group that's cleaning up the rivers, or there's so many ways. What comes to mind for you? Let yourself feel that. If your inner critic comes in and goes, well, you should have been doing more, or you should have been doing it already, tell it to be quiet. We're really just looking for ways to open more, not to criticize where we are. It might be a commitment to being in nature more often, to let yourself take in the sights, the smells, the touch of a tree, for instance. Let yourself breathe, let your body be soft. What are you inspired to do? What action are you inspired to do? And then let's loop that back in with we are only going to stay connected and try to do something for what we believe in, what we are connected with, what we love. Shaming, disconnection, those are all things that will make it harder. But what would make it possible? Like how could you find something that you're willing to work on that you care about enough to find other people to work with? This time of year, there's a lot of neighborhood cleanups going on in the green areas around your neighborhood, or maybe something more long term. Maybe you want to get into city politics so that you can help change policies. Let yourself dream big here for a moment. We'll stay with this for another couple minutes. Let yourself breathe, relax your body. And this might be something that you need to take on as a bit of a research project. Like, I'm going to look for environmental groups in my area, or I'm going to go up and down the street and see if two or three people want to help me clean up that garbage pit behind the park there, or whatever that might be. So let yourself feel into that. This isn't something that has to be done in 5 minutes. Oftentimes, this is a different kind of opening into connection and opening into power. One of the wonderful things that happens as we take action is that we don't feel as hopeless. We feel like getting together with other people, we could actually do some good. We could make a big difference.